again. Thank you so much for coming out, and it's so great to see you all again. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You may or may not have heard, but last August of 2015, there was a Royal Commission set up in Australia to look into how various institutions handled abuse of children allegations, actually sexual child abuse allegations. One of the organizations that they looked into were the Jehovah's Witnesses, and we had the rare privilege of seeing one of the governing body members on the stand testifying on their behalf. Now, in the description of this video, I've put a link where you too can see for yourself all these videos that are online, and you can see from the Royal Commission's website the various testimony and the various evidence that was presented in all 8 days of their investigation. But just to get things going, I put together a very quick summary of the events that happened on day 8 when Geoffrey Jackson testified for the governing body. And then after that, we're going to discuss some of the shocking details of what was said, what was learned, some of the lies that were told. It's going to be really interesting. So let's get rolling.
Jackson, that's the question I was putting to you, you see. No, Mr. Jackson, I wasn't asking you that. That doesn't answer my question. Still not answering my question. Not in the decision, Mr. Jackson. Please address my question.
Okay. Yes. Well, please, could I just use an example?
Mr. Jackson, you're not dealing with my question.
I'm sorry, I apologise.
Would you like me to put it again? Would you like me to put it again? Do you understand that? Mm-hmm. You do?
I do understand that, Your Honour.
Mr. Jackson, we covered that.
Well, I'm trying to understand your answer, Mr. Jackson. So if you can just address yourself to my question. I'll come to that, Mr. Jackson.
Okay, so
we'll get through this a lot quicker and easier if we just address it one step at a time. But you know, Mr. Jackson, my question had nothing to do with involvement.
No, Mr. Jackson, my question.
Jackson. Sorry, my apologies.
Mr. Jackson,
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry, Your Honour.
Mr. Jackson.
Sorry, Mr. Stewart, do you know what the facts are?
Mr. Jackson,
Sorry.
Jackson, that's...
I'm sorry, I apologise.
Would you like me to put it again?
Mr. Jackson.
Well, may I mention... Oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
Mr. Jackson, for the love of God, please. So you just saw about 3 hours worth of testimony, all condensed into about 2 minutes. But, you know, it wasn't all fun and games to watch. In fact, it was a most serious occasion where we got to see that Geoffrey Jackson said he was very happy to appear there. But we know that he wasn't telling the truth about this because it was such a struggle just to get him to testify. I mean, first of all, the Royal Commission had to battle against the Watchtower lawyers who were insistent that he was not able to testify because he was in Australia because his father was ill. So they kept saying it's not possible, it would be unconscionable for him to be there. Then the branch coordinator lied on the stand as to what Geoffrey Jackson did. He tried to say that all he did was translate for the organization. And then, you know, once the judge realized what was going on and he saw through all their shenanigans, he then ordered Geoffrey Jackson to appear. So that is why, at the end, he was there. But, you know, I like to think that Jehovah had a hand in all of this. I mean, what are the chances that a governing body member would just so happen to be there in Australia at the very moment when we needed him to testify? Anyways, let's watch.
So some weeks ago, it came to the attention of the Royal Commission that Mr. Jackson, a member of the governing body of the Jehovah's Witnesses in New York, was in Australia. We wrote to the lawyers acting for the Jehovah's Witnesses in Australia and asked if their client would procure a statement from Mr. Jackson and make him available as a witness. The reply that was received was that Mr. Jackson was in Australia for private, compassionate reasons, and also that since the governing body was not involved in the implementation and administration of policies and procedures in relation to child sexual abuse, he would not be able to give relevant evidence. The Royal Commission then left the matter at that point but subsequently came to the view that Mr. Jackson's evidence would likely be useful for this hearing, particularly in relation to the formulation of policies and procedures by the governing body and the possibility for change of policies and procedures in the future. We therefore wrote last week asking whether the lawyers for the Jehovah's Witnesses in Australia would accept service of a summons on Mr. Jackson. The reply that was received reiterated that for reasons of compassion related to why Mr. Jackson was in the country, it would, as it was put, be unconscionable for him to be required to prepare to give evidence and to give evidence. Taking that into account, Mr. Jackson has not been summoned to give evidence.
I understand the reason for compassion being extended to him. I have no difficulty with that. And for that reason, I have not issued a summons requiring him to attend. But at the moment, we face a serious issue which only the Church can help us with.
Mr. Jackson would probably not have been of any assistance in any event, because his role and his responsibility is in relation to the translation of matters. It's not in relation to these sorts of matters.
Again, I'd assumed that change has to be either directed or sanctioned in New York.
Well, Your Honour, it may be the case. It depends upon what change is contemplated.
Still at a loss, because as I understand it, the ultimate framework comes from New York. But I just want to make it plain that these are really significant issues. We had thought that perhaps Mr. Jackson might be able to help us with them, but if he can't,
Your Honour, no.
Then so be it. Now, we had, I've forgotten her name, but the doctor last Friday.
Dr. Applewhite, Your Honour.
Yes. And you realise where her evidence ended up?
Yes, I do, Your Honour, yes.
In terms of the Church's processes?
Yes, Your Honour.
Although she came to say that they were good, the ultimate position, as we understand what she said, is they're flawed. And those flaws are the things that I'm talking to you about now. Brian, did you give those instructions to senior counsel?
The instructions regarding Mr. Jackson? Yes.
It led me to believe that there was little that Mr. Jackson could add to the discussion. And no doubt that's what you expected would happen. Is that right?
That's true. I still concur with that.
Well, I'm starting to form a totally different impression, I have to tell you.
He wouldn't have involvement in matters to do with the Coordinators Committee, which handles legal, nor with the Service Committee, which handles service matters.
But he sits at the top with others in relation to all of those committees, doesn't he?
No, they're different governing body members are assigned specifically to different committees.
I understand that, but nevertheless, the governing body, I assume, has the ultimate say in all things.
When things come back to them as a governing body, yes.
And he's a member of that.
Yes, he's a member of the governing body.
He's here in Australia.
So, Brian, you've given evidence that you gave instructions to counsel on the point of Mr. Jackson not being able to assist and his activities being with relation to translations. And I, as a matter of fairness, must put to you that those instructions you gave were false, were they not?
No, I don't believe so. Mr. Jackson does oversee the translation work, but as part of the writing committee member, which he is one of the governing body members on that committee. So,
and I suggest to you, I put to you, that when you gave those instructions, you knew them to be false.
No, I disagree.
And by giving those instructions, you sought to mislead the Royal Commission to protect Mr. Jackson from any potential summons to appear. But as I understand it, your input on those committees is not restricted to the question of translation. It would cover all the business of those committees. Is that right?
It covers all the business in the aspect of me analysing the scriptural basis for decisions.
So as that last clip showed, Geoffrey Jackson was not just a translator, as he admitted, but that he was involved along with the other 6 governing body members, with overseeing the entire JW organization. So their efforts to try to mislead the Royal Commission by not having him testify didn't work.
Accept that the Jehovah's Witness organization has a problem with child abuse amongst its members?
I accept that child abuse is a problem right throughout the community, and it's something that we've had to deal with as well.
And do you accept that it's presented, I withdraw that, do you accept that the manner in which your organization has dealt with allegations of child sexual abuse has also presented problems?
There have been changes in policies over the last 20 or 30 years where we've tried to address some of those problem areas, and by the fact that we've changed the policy would indicate that the original policies weren't perfect.
And you accept, of course, that your organization, including people in positions of responsibility like elders, are not immune from the problem of child sexual abuse?
That appears to be the case.
And do you accept, Mr. Jackson, that many of the efforts that are being made by different people and organizations to highlight the issue of child sexual abuse and try and find solutions are genuine efforts to improve the situation?
I do accept that, and that's why I'm happy to testify.
That is ridiculous, isn't it?
One of the things that's emerged in the last couple of weeks, that in Australia at least, amongst the Jehovah's, or in the Jehovah's Witness organization, there's a practice of not reporting child sexual abuse allegations to the authorities unless required by law to do so. Do you accept that?
I'm not familiar with the statistics. Or the general practice, but I can tell you why there is a spiritual dilemma because of this question.
Well, that's what I'm driving at. So perhaps you can address that question specifically, which is this: is there a scriptural basis to that policy being, or practice being, not to report child sexual abuse allegations to the authorities unless required by law to do so?
Thank you for the opportunity to explain this. I think very clearly Mr. Toole pointed out that if the Australian government and all the states was to make mandatory reporting, it would make it so much easier for us. But the ethical, or the, let's say the spiritual dilemma that an elder has is to consider, how did he get the information that he has been told?
So you notice that he never really did answer the question as to, is there a scriptural basis why the Jehovah's Witnesses do not report child sexual abuse to the authorities? And what he said about mandatory reporting I found to be very disturbing. So basically what he's saying is that Jehovah's organization needs Satan's organization to force them to do what is right in the first place. It's just such a kooky, weird system. And then he said that the dilemma is in helping to protect children. No, that's not what he said. Sorry, what he said was the dilemma is, where is the source coming from? So what is to follow in this video is 3 hours of the testimony, all condensed, as short as I could possibly make it, showing all the highlights, the lowlights, and the outright lies, as told by Geoffrey Jackson. Let's focus on the lies first.
And would you disagree then with anyone who said that the efforts to highlight and deal with child sexual abuse in the Jehovah's Witness Church is engaging in apostate lies?
I guess that's a broad question, because sometimes those who make these accusations make many other accusations as well. But let me assure you, the person making the accusation is not the main thing. The main thing is there some basis to the accusation?
And yet, what about let?
Another way we can contribute to the oneness, rejecting false stories that are designed to separate us from Jehovah's organization. As an example, think about the apostate-driven lies and dishonesties that Jehovah's organization is permissive toward pedophiles. I mean, that is ridiculous, isn't it? If anybody takes action against someone who would threaten our young ones and takes action to protect our young ones, it's Jehovah's organization. We reject outright such lies.
So just what does your organization do, Brother Let? If you manage to find 2 witnesses and you end up disfellowshipping the molester, no one knows why he is disfellowshipped, and he is still free to molest all the kids in the world. No pun intended. What Stephen Lett said here is an obvious lie, but, it gives us a window into what the JW strategy is. Let's say, for example, that this really horrible person infiltrates an organization, and he starts just doing terrible things. He starts hurting people, abusing them, stealing things from people, and no one knows who this person is. But then one day you catch him in the act and you realize who this person is. So you approach him privately and you say, hey buddy, this needs to stop. I saw you doing it. And you need to confess what you're doing, and you need to turn around, and you need to apologize for all the ones that you've hurt. Now, the guilty person has basically 2 options, don't they? They could be very humble and say, yes, you're right. They could start, repenting in dust and ashes and saying they're sorry and begging for forgiveness and pleading and saying that they promise they will turn around and do the right thing. Or they could choose to go on the offensive. Maybe they're not sorry for what they've done. Maybe they're happy to continue profiting off of all of their victims. He could say, oh yeah? You thought you saw something here? Well, I'll give you one chance to leave quietly now, or else I will destroy you. All your friends and your own family won't even want to have anything to do with you by the time I'm through with you. He knows that you know the truth about him, so he does his best to silence you. And if you refuse, he'll assassinate your character so that you appear to be a bitter liar, and he proceeds to warn others about how horrible you've become. And in fear, they stay away from you. And so you see, this is the option the JW organization has decided to take. Instead of humbly admitting that they have made mistakes and righting their wrongs and apologizing to all their thousands of victims for messing up their lives, they prefer to besmirch the good names of those who know the truth about them, calling us bitter and angry liars. And this is what Stephen Lett was doing, going on the offensive, telling bald-faced lies to cover their own heinousness. Okay, now on to the next lie.
Do you see yourselves as Jehovah God's spokespeople on earth?
That, I think, would seem to be quite presumptuous to say that we are the only spokesperson that God is using.
So what he said there is not true. It's certainly not what the organization has been saying for the last 100 years. As you'll see from this 1943 Watchtower magazine, it says there's only one organization on earth today fulfilling the righteous requirements outlined in this commission from the Lord. The society, represented by the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, is the only one. And further down you see where I've highlighted, we should not expect more than one organization doing this work. And blah, 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 blah. In fact, they even further call themselves the Lord's choice. And then you'll see here on this other slide several other quotes from many different places from Watchtower Society publications, how Jehovah's organization alone, only this organization, that the faithful slave is the channel, and that you need to obey them to have Jehovah's approval, and so forth. So he's trying to say that it would be presumptuous to say this, but that's exactly what the Watchtower organization has been saying since the beginning of time. So now on to the next lie.
Proverbs 13:24, yes.
And the exact quote is, whoever holds back his rod hates his son. What does that mean?
So, Your Honour, you'll notice there's an asterisk there on the term rod, and you see the footnote, discipline or punishment. So, in the application of this, the term rod is used as a symbol or a metaphor to indicate the authority to give some punishment.
So it's not about inflicting corporal punishment then?
It absolutely is not about inflicting corporal punishment.
It would have been when first written, wouldn't it?
How people applied it back then at that time, of course, is open to question.
Well, what you're telling me, as I understand it, is that your religion, your church, is prepared to interpret the Bible having regard to contemporary social attitudes and standards. I've taken you to the way your own church constructs the biblical references, which, as we've noticed, takes us back to Proverbs, correct?
That is correct.
But what you've given us is the understanding which your church now has about how that's to apply in contemporary society. Is that right?
That's a good question. Obviously, I can only speak about what we understand this to mean now.
Does your church accept corporal punishment of children?
Our church accepts the family arrangement and expects that parents have the responsibility to discipline and raise their children.
That doesn't answer my question. Do you accept corporal punishment?
In our literature, I think you'll see time and time again, we've endeavoured to explain that here, discipline is referring to more a mental point of view.
I regret to tell you, you're still not answering my question. Do you accept corporal punishment?
No.
You don't?
Not personally, no. And not as an organisation. We don't encourage it.
But do you prohibit it?
Our literature has pointed out that the true way to discipline children is by educating them, not giving corporal punishment. Your Honour, I can only tell you the spirit behind our writings.
Okay, so since he was reluctant to answer these questions on corporal punishment, I'll answer them on his behalf. No, the organization does not prohibit spankings, and yes, they have in their publications agreed that it's a good thing to give children spankings, and promoted them. As you can see from this quote from the 1978 Family Life book, it says here, a spanking may be a lifesaver to a child. And it's saying here, foolishness is tied up with the heart of a boy, the rod of discipline is what will remove it far from him, and so forth. So it's saying that this is definitely something that is needed from time to time. But as society has softened on spanking children, the organization has also softened on this, which is exactly the point the judge was making, that they are interpreting the Bible according to contemporary standards. Because if you see here from the 2006 Watchtower, they quote again that same scripture about the rod of discipline, but they say, however, not all children need physical punishment. It leaves you to believe, though, that some do, right? It's definitely not prohibiting it. And if you look at the 2004 Watchtower, again quoting a scripture there of Proverbs, it says the rod of discipline, it does not necessarily mean spanking a child. And that if you further go down to read, it says it may be sufficient, kindly rebuking a child may be sufficient, but then another child may require a stronger reproof. So he said, Geoffrey Jackson said that the society does not agree with corporal punishment, but clearly they do, and they most certainly do not prohibit it.
But biblically speaking, the role of judges in the congregation, it lays with men. That's what the Bible says, and that's what we endeavour to follow.
Can you give me the reference for that?
Yes. In the scriptures,
that is judges being only men. Not elders, but judges being only men.
Okay. I apologise, Your Honour. Seeing you asked this question, I cannot give you the exact scriptural reference, but we'll be happy to do that.
Oh, I can give him a scripture. How about Judges chapter 4, verses 4 and 5, where it says, Now Deborah, A prophetess, the wife of Lapidoth, was judging Israel at that time. She used to sit under Deborah's palm tree between Ramah and Bethel in the mountainous region of Ephraim. The Israelites would go up to her for judgment. Now, we know that if Deborah existed today and was attempting to be a female judge, the JW organization would disfellowship her, because clearly they don't seem to like this. Yet, in the Bible, we see God recorded this for us for a reason. And you'll note that for some reason, Geoffrey Jackson does not want to talk about this verse. He seems to have no idea where in the Bible there's actually a woman judge. Now, I'm not a governing body member, but I knew that Deborah was a judge and that she's a woman, and that this is recorded for us for our benefit. You'll notice here on the screen, you'll see submissions of senior counsel assisting the Royal Commission. This is page 77. And as I said before, I'm going to put a link to it in the description of this video. But you'll notice that this is what the lawyers had to say after listening to his testimony, that he referred only to those books that talk about male judges in the Bible. He completely glossed over Judges chapter 4, verses 4 and 5, which we just read. And that since it was recorded in the Bible, he sees no reason why there cannot be judges today in the JW organization. This next segment demonstrates just how out of touch the governing body is when dealing with child sexual abuse allegations. Geoffrey Jackson actually thought it was a good idea to bring in the circuit overseer to hear a young girl who's just been molested explain all the gory details. So she's now sitting in front of a panel of men, and he sees nothing wrong with that. I mean, why don't we just bring the Pope in while we're at it? And then he claimed that he had heard some of the testimony from the JW elders as they were presenting testimony at this commission, but he was too busy to hear any of the testimony presented by any of the victims. He keeps saying that he's empathetic towards them, but his actions completely belie this claim.
Can you understand the circumstance for a woman who brings an allegation against an elder, who is a friend of the others, who must judge the truth or otherwise of the allegation? Can you understand how that person must feel?
I can try to understand it, Your Honour, yes. But again, could I ask, and again, this is not my field of activity, but as far as I understand, we have a process in place whereby a neutral member, like a circuit overseer, will be involved with such a sensitive case.
It would be the case, would it not, that even a circuit overseer is going to know an elder well?
They should be familiar, but they also know the victim well.
Well, I don't know whether you heard the evidence of the survivors here. Did you hear that evidence?
No,
But you'll accept, I'm sure, that in many instances where a woman or young woman makes such an allegation, she would feel a lot more comfortable having to make the allegation and explain the circumstances to another woman.
I can't say that I would give a comment on that, Mr. Stewart, because you see, again, it takes away the consideration of the relationships in our congregations. It's not like your churches where people just go to church and don't talk to one another.
You see, it takes away the relationships we have in our congregations. It's not like your churches out there. What was that? It was so condescending. Ugh.
I was wondering whether you could have a structure which meant that the judicial decision as to whether or not the allegation was true could be determined by a body capable of having women represented on it, and that body's decision would then be taken to the elders in relation to decisions to disfellowship. Do you understand?
I understand, Your Honour.
Well, is it possible to make that change?
It is possible to make sure that elders are fully aware of the whole story. But for women to be elders in the congregation, that is not possible.
No, Mr. Jackson, I wasn't asking you that. I was asking you to consider. I was asking you to consider whether the process may involve a determination which we outside the church would call a judicial determination. That is the allegation true or false? And then that decision having been made, the elders would then make a decision as to the consequence, being disfellowship or otherwise. Do you understand?
I do understand.
Could women be involved in the determination of whether or not the allegation is true?
Well, Your Honour, if I could say, I think they already are involved.
Not in the decision, not in the decision, Mr. Jackson. Please address my question.
Okay. Yes, well, please tell what the facts are.
Mr. Jackson, you're not dealing with my question.
I'm sorry, I apologise.
Would you like me to put it again? Would you like me to put it again?
If you would, please.
So after much back and forth, Geoffrey Jackson did concede to the fact that perhaps the judge did have a good idea here by having women be part of the process. So if a child has been molested, they can approach these sisters in the congregation and tell them their story. And then these women could then go to the room full of men, the elders in a more of a judicial setting, and talk to them. So it's much less intimidating and much less traumatizing for the victims. And I really hope that this is something that they do implement, because I think it will make a big difference in how children who have been molested and how their cases within the congregation are handled. Then in the next couple of clips after that, we see basically the society really does not know how to handle abuse cases of sexual abuse. They would rather take the risk that the person, won't reoffend, but we know they will. That is the nature of these child predators. So to assume that he's not going to do it now because, Jehovah's blessing the organization or something is simply taking a foolish chance with the lives and the well-being of children within your organization. And they keep talking about how they're going to have to change their policies and have to rechange their policies. So let's watch.
Let's take the situation in a family where one of the children, let's say the eldest, reports having been abused by her father.
Yes, sorry, is there a question?
Yes, if that report is accepted as having validity, you would accept that the potential is that the other children in the family remain at risk.
That is correct.
And by not reporting to the authorities, is the case not that the confidentiality of the one who reported is regarded as being more important than to protect those who are still at risk?
Now, if the circumstance is that the young person alleges they were abused by a member of the congregation, but not a member of their own family, and again, you as the elder are totally persuaded that the person is telling the truth, what do you do then? The assumption behind it, of course, is that the alleged abuser is a risk to others. What do you do?
That's correct, yes. So there is a process, and I think at the moment we are in the process of adjusting some of our policies. So that's why it is a good time for this Royal Commission. But definitely it becomes obvious that we need to inform some. We need to put restrictions on that person as to any type of association with minors. And if a person is genuinely innocent, they're not doing this, they should not mind the fact that they can clear their name by not being involved at all with dealing with children.
The reality is if there's only one witness in the case of child sexual abuse, then it cannot be taken further by the elders, and as it's put in the literature, it's left in the hands of Jehovah.
Deuteronomy 22, 23 to 27.
Page 304. If, however, the man happened to meet the engaged girl in the field, and the man overpowered her and lay down with her, and the man who lay down with her is to die by himself, and you must do nothing to the girl. The girl has not committed a sin deserving of death. This case is the same as when a man attacks his fellow man and murders him. for he happened to meet her in the field, and the engaged girl screamed, but there was no one to rescue her. So the point of this last example is that there's no second witness, is there? Because the woman's in the field, she screamed, but there was no one to rescue her. Do you accept that?
Could I explain, Mr. Stewart, that, you see, I think already under testimony, some of Jehovah's Witnesses have explained that the two witnesses needed can be, in some cases, the circumstances. I think, was it an example given?
I'll come to that, Mr. Jackson.
Okay, so
we'll get through this a lot quicker and easier if we just address it one step at a time. So
okay.
the present step...
So the answer to your question?
The present step is this, is that in that example you accept it's a case where there was no other witness beyond the woman herself.
There was no other witness except the woman herself, but added to that were the circumstances.
Yes, well, the circumstances were that she was raped in the field.
Mm-hmm.
And,
yes, but they were circumstances.
And it was sufficient, there being only one witness, it was nevertheless sufficient for the conclusion that the man should be stoned to death.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Now, is it...
I think we're agreeing on the point.
Yes, is it not the case that had Jesus been asked about a case of sexual abuse, he may have referred back to this part of Deuteronomy and said that it's not required to have two witnesses?
I certainly would like to ask Jesus that, and I can't at the moment. I hope to in the future. But that's a hypothetical question which if we had an answer, then we could support what you said.
Well, it's hypothetical in a sense, but really what I'm driving at is the scriptural basis, and you the scholar, I'm not, is the scriptural basis to the two-witness rule really so solid, or is there not space for your governing body to recognize that in cases of sexual abuse, it need not apply?
Again, if I could just mention the fact that we've already acknowledged that circumstances can also be one of the witnesses.
Well, I'll come to that, but my question is a different one. It's whether the scriptural basis to the two-witness rule in relation to cases of sexual abuse has a proper foundation.
We believe it does.
I found this whole segment very frustrating to watch. I mean, here you have an excellent scripture being presented here by the lawyer, the one in Deuteronomy, where it's talking about a sexual crime that was committed. A woman is being raped. It is simply her word against his. And at the conclusion of the matter, when there was nobody there to help her, she screamed. And when she spoke to the judges in the city about this, they deemed that the man should have been put to death. Now, I don't disagree with the two-witness rule. I understand the meaning of it. I understand why the Bible talks about it, how a matter cannot be firmly established until you have two witnesses. Excellent rule, except when you're talking about a sexual crime. Why? Because nobody commits sexual crimes in front of an audience. They're done in privacy because they're usually a means of control and power over an individual, and they don't want to have witnesses around to see this. So here you have a perfect scripture that the lawyer shows, where this is the very thing that's happening. It's a sexual crime where there are no witnesses, one word against another. And yet the organization does not want to listen to it. There's absolutely no reason in the world why this scripture cannot be used to throw the two-witness rule out the door where it belongs when it comes to sexual crimes being committed. And now we're going to look at the next segment, which talks about how it's basically impossible to leave the JW organization without losing everybody and everything you ever cared about. The only way that I've found is where it's possible to kind of leave them and have a measure of life afterwards is to move. You either have to move far away, which is what I did, or you have to take a vow of silence and just simply not say a word. You cannot say a word when people say, oh, the end is near, and you're just supposed to smile and nod like an idiot. Yes, 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 yes. Because the second you open your mouth and say, well, you've been saying that now for over 100 years, The second you say that, or even if you like somebody's Facebook posts that is saying something, you know, pseudo-negative about the JW organization, you may find yourself disfellowshipped and you'll lose everything.
Mr. Jackson, let's take that hypothesis of the two elders visit the household of someone who's been inactive for some time and seek to explore whether that person will come back to the active fold and encourage them to do so, in the process of which, in visiting that household, they find that that person is, in the eyes of the Jehovah's Witness, living in sin. That person would then be subject to the discipline of the organization, wouldn't they?
In a case such as that, yes.
And their only way to avoid that would be to disassociate.
If they didn't want to go through the process, but might I mention, in your hypothetical situation, the person has indicated that they want to come back, and many people in that situation do want to come back.
No, Mr. Jackson, my hypothetical had nothing to do with anyone wanting to come back. My hypothetical is premised on the basis that someone wants to leave or not be involved, and I'm exploring the possibility which you put out there of them being able to just become inactive and not actually end up outside the organization or not end up disassociating. Do you understand? So
I do. Sorry, I misunderstood the fact that you said that they'd indicated they wanted to come back. I'm sorry.
So the point we've got to then is that, as I understand it, is that a person who's become inactive and wishes merely to remain inactive is still subject to the organization's rules and discipline, not so.
You want to come back, but we don't run a police state where we go and try and force people to follow our beliefs.
I wouldn't call them a police state, but they most certainly do encourage each other to rat on others when they see wrongdoing. For example, look here at the February 15th, 2012 Watchtower. It says, if we know that a brother or a sister has fallen into such wrongdoing, we should encourage that one to approach the elders and seek their help. If he or she does not do so within a reasonable period of time, though, we should report the wrongdoing. The Christian congregation is a spiritual haven, and we must help to protect it by reporting serious wrongdoing. One of the signs, this is just a side point, but one of the signs of a cult is that the members report on each other.
And so, for example, if they had become inactive or sought to fade without formally dissociating, and the elders came to visit and found them celebrating Christmas or a birthday, they would be found to be in transgression of the rules, would they not?
That is not my understanding, but again, as I said, it's not my field. That goes into policy with regard to those type of things. But from my personal experience, that's not the case.
And yet this is the case. I'm not sure if he's lying here by pretending not to know, or if he honestly doesn't know. But I knew that this was the case, so I'm very surprised that he wouldn't know. If you look here at what's on the screen, it's a Pay Attention to Yourselves and to the Flock Elders book. And under the heading Apostasy, where it says that elders would make a brief announcement to the congregation that such one has disassociated himself, one thing that would make you guilty of apostasy, as it says there, is celebrating a false religious holiday. It would be similar to performing any other act of false worship. So obviously this would include Christmas, because Christmas is a false religious holiday. If you were to be celebrating Christmas, you would be considered to be somebody who has performed an act of false worship, and you would then be announced to the congregation as someone who should be disassociated.
Well, just on that point, Mr. Jackson, has the governing body considered apologizing to survivors of child sexual abuse at the hands of elders within the organization?
I haven't been in any discussions with regard to that.
Is that something that you foresee might happen? In other words, that an apology at least be considered?
The governing body has apologised on other matters, so for me to say I can't speak collectively for everybody, but we have apologised on things in the past in other areas, so it is perceivable.
No, unfortunately, that is a lie. That is not true. They have never apologized, to my recollection. I know they know how to apologize because, as we can see from this Awake magazine entitled How to Apologize from September 2015, different points here that you see on the screen: be quick to apologize, do not hesitate to apologize, thinking that the passing of time will cover over the offenses, prove that you mean it, accept responsibility, face the facts. But I have no recollection of them ever apologizing for all the different things that they've done to mess up people's lives, whether it's by giving false information on blood, whether it's information about the end of the world supposedly coming, whether it's brothers that had to spend, some of them up to 10 or more years in prison to avoid, because they were told that they weren't allowed to do any form of military service. I mean, the list just goes on and on. So I scoured the Society's DVD, and this here that you see on the screen, this March 15th, 1980 Watchtower, was the best I could find when looking for an apology. So please, if you can find an actual apology from the organization, I would love to see it. You'll see what this article says. It's actually funny. Look at the first line. In modern times, such eagerness, as they always call themselves when they give wrong dates, they just call it eagerness, commendable in itself, has led to attempts at setting dates for the desired liberation from the suffering and troubles that a lot of persons throughout the earth, blah, 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 whatever. They said that there was considerable expectation was aroused regarding the year 1975. There were statements made then and thereafter stressing that this was only a possibility. Unfortunately, however, along with such cautionary information, BS gag, what the heck? Okay, I'll continue. There were other statements published that implied that such realization of hopes by that year was more of a probability than a mere possibility. This is their idea of an apology, okay? It is to be regretted. There's regret. Okay, so they express regret that these latter statements apparently overshadowed the cautionary ones and contributed to a buildup of the expectation already initiated. And then it just further goes on to, it quotes this 1976 Watchtower, saying that if anyone has been disappointed through not following this line of thought, he should now concentrate on adjusting his viewpoint, seeing that it was not the word of God that failed or deceived him and brought disappointment, but that his own understanding was based on wrong premises. So this is their idea of an apology. In saying, and then here, this part is kind of an apology. In saying anyone, the Watchtower included all disappointed ones of Jehovah's Witnesses, hence including persons having to do with the publication of the information that contributed to the buildup of hope centered on that date. So they're now blaming the writers as well. It's so hysterical, I find, to read this, because they're saying, we regret having said this, but we did caution you, and it is your fault if you ran away with it, and you do need to adjust your viewpoint, and it's commendable in itself, and it's, oh my God, it's the most ridiculous apology. I mean, would you accept this as an apology from someone who has seriously wronged you?
Has the governing body considered the introduction of a scheme of paying compensation to people within the organization who've suffered child sexual abuse at the hands of elders?
Well, let me say there are many schemes that we've had with regard to humanitarian areas where, like flood victims and so on. I know this is not related, I'm just explaining.
Well, don't hold your breath. I seriously do not expect the JW organization to compensate any of its victims. Why? Because they're an organization that doesn't even bother to admit that they were wrong. All the times they've messed up people's lives, all the wrong prophecies and the wrong things that they've said, causing innocent people to die, Malawi. I mean, thousands and thousands have died as a result of following Watchtower policy, and thousands have suffered. Children who have been abused at the Watchtower Society they either pay them off quietly, or now we're beginning to see some high-profile cases because people are like, you know what? I'm not going to accept your money. I'm going to take it to the next step and see if it can get the publicity that it deserves, which is what's happening now, which is exactly what happened to the Catholic Church in around the year 2002. I just watched the movie Spotlight, and they were exposed around the year 2002, and the Jehovah's Witnesses, they say, are falling close behind to this, about 10 years behind. So anyways, I don't expect them to pay any of these, compensate these victims unless Satan's system intervenes and forces them to compensate the victims, which is what I believe will happen. So I think there will be a little bit of justice thanks to Satan's system, because Jehovah's organization is waiting on Jehovah to make it all right. But in the meantime, they're leaving a trail of heartache and pain. So what happened at the end of this commission, as I've stated before, is the lawyers involved, the senior counsel involved for the Royal Commission submitted a report, which you can read online. And then the Watchtower submitted their counter argument to that. It's about 120 pages, and I read it. And I have to say, it was so tense reading it. I was so stressed out because it's so disappointing. I mean, you see me as somebody maybe who's got an axe to grind against this organization, okay? I'm trying to warn people the same way I warned people when I was a Jehovah's Witness, warning them about the end of the world. Now I'm warning them about the lies of this organization and how it's not true. But you didn't know me when I was a Jehovah's Witness, and I loved the organization. I mean, just to give you an example, when I was either pioneering or working, but on Sundays I took the day off. And when the Proclaimers book came out, I would get up like at 6 a.m. I'd make my coffee and I'd sit there in my chair and I'd read the book, and I was in love with this book. I was reading it. I was like, this is the history of Jehovah's organization. I remember kissing the book. Just shows how kooky I was, eh? But I really loved the organization. And so for me to see that they take no responsibility for all the thousands of lives that have been ruined by their policies, that they have a history of covering up and making excuses. The whole thing is, when I read it, it's constantly a submission, 120 pages of excuses, passing the buck, blaming someone else. I don't know, it's just so disappointing, is all I can say. But that's why I'm making videos like this, because I think people need to know enough is enough. You know, we're going spotlight on them now. And anyway, so the next thing that I believe that's going to happen is there's going to be the final findings report that's going to be submitted by the Royal Commission. And they're going to post that on their website, as they have posted the findings of other case studies that they've looked at. So the witnesses were number 29. And I noticed they've been slowly posting the findings of previous case studies. So I imagine when they get to 29, then they'll post this one as well. And I really hope something good will come out of it. I mean, Geoffrey Jackson seemed to indicate that they're changing their policies. There's going to be a few things, like maybe they will have women more involved, which would help to prevent some of the traumatizing that has occurred. You know, there are some good things that may come out of this. And we're definitely hoping for the best. So thank you all for watching my video, and if you like it, then like it, and we hope to see you again soon. Thank you.
I'm prefacing this in the fact that it's not my field that I work with every day. Seeing it's not my field per se, I couldn't give an inclusive answer with regard to that. I can try to understand it, Your Honour, yes, but again, could I ask, and again, this is not my field of activity, I'm going way out of my field. I would have to check on that, because personally, that's not my field. That is not my understanding. But again, as I said, it's not my field.
You say it's not your field, but you remember the governing body, which is responsible, as you've said, for the whole field, and you've been a member for 10 years, and all the committees are responsible to and accountable to the governing body.
So that is correct.
So it is your field, isn't it?